and international expansion. I'm Dr. Willie Wilson. Vote for me. Send me to Washington. God bless.
Paid for by Willie Wilson for Senate 2020.
7:37, a check on the roads this morning in the Team Hochberg Traffic Center with Jim Telemonti.
In northwest Indiana on 8094 eastbound at I-65, the right lane is blocked with a traffic hazard of some kind. On the inbound Kennedy, traffic's congested. Ohio to the Bird Circle downtown. It's 21 minutes O'Hare to downtown. Outbound 20. On Eisenhower, traffic sluggish. Kedzie to Western. 29 minutes, 390 to downtown. Outbound 28 on Stevenson. It's heavy approaching the Ryan. The ramp to the inbound Ryan backed up. 29 minutes, 355 to Lakeshore Drive. Outbound the same, heavy approaching the Ryan. Inbound Ryan delays start at 35th Street at Pershing and the Express. Travel time, 20 minutes, 95th to downtown. Outbound 14 minutes. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte. On AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our AM 560 Weather Center. A morning shower or thunderstorm is possible. Becoming less humid this afternoon, warm, high 85, clear and 67 overnight. 77 at O'Hare. Next news coming up at 8. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy, and I want to point out the comments in this Future View series of columns that the Wall Street Journal started running. This is getting college students from across the nation to comment on a particularly salient issue. And it's, a half a dozen comments on the hot button issue du jour. Most recently, one of the more recent Future View columns, they asked college kids, both undergrads and in some cases graduate students, about the cancel culture. Cancel culture. I'll give you an example of some of the responses. The responses are actually always well crafted. That's, I guess, how they make the threshold to get into the journal, even when there's some disagreement. Imagine that, college students respectfully and substantively disagreeing. At least on the pages of the journal it happens. On cancel culture, Joseph Moranti, who's an economics and finance major at Seton Hall. Cancel culture creates an atmosphere that hinders personal growth. Only a culture that allows for redemption and open discourse can encourage the moral progress we all want. If the perfect person whom cancel culture demands really exists, let him cast the first stone. Right. The flip side, Catherine Quinn, Syracuse University, Public Relations. It's bewildering that prominent figures from YouTube stars and children's book authors to corporate executives are upset when the public disagrees loudly with their bigoted and prejudicial sentiments. How can you voice your problematic thoughts in the public arena, then be angry when you face a public trial and social death? Isn't that the price that comes with a platform? When your livelihood depends on the public, they have a right to determine your success. To be canceled is to be held accountable for your actions and finally face the consequences. Freedom of speech doesn't grant freedom from repercussions. Well, there's so much that's problematic with her comment, but at least it's on point. And if you could have the undergrad from Seton Hall and the undergrad from Syracuse actually have this kind of discussion in an open forum on a college campus, then perhaps you'd be making some progress here. The problem, it seems to me, is you can't have professors have that, or administrators have that conversation on a college campus. And case in point, Joshua Katz, who we profiled the other week, a classics professor at Princeton, who was almost canceled at Princeton for agreeing in part and disagreeing in part with a letter signed by many, many dozens of his colleagues, the professor at Princeton, that demanded all sorts of social justice, leftist count by race type programs on campus to address, the typical things, the phraseology you've heard, systemic racism on campus and white privilege and so on and so forth. The one that he disagreed most vociferously against, Professor Katz, the idea that we're going to create or should create some star chamber of academics on campus to review the research of all the professors to make sure there was no tinge of racism in anything that they researched or were planning to research. And, of course, Professor Katz arguing the obvious confiscatory effect that would have on free thought and research on campus. One of the arguably best colleges in the world, most prestigious colleges in the world, and this is what's happening. Well, he writes in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend, hey, I'm happy to report that Princeton's leadership has done the right thing, and I'm not under investigation for thought crimes against humanity. Nevertheless, the president of Princeton, Christoph Eisgruber, told the student newspaper that Professor Katz had violated his obligation to exercise free speech responsibly for respectfully disagreeing in part and agreeing in part with his colleagues per the contents of the letter they had written to the president and the administration. It's a remarkable story, telling one. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Sam Abrams. He's a professor of politics at Sarah Lawrence College, visiting scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, and he has a good piece at RealClearPolicy.com about American college students being more reasonable than we think, and the students profiled in the Future View columns over the last several weeks speak to what Sam Abrams is saying. What about the professorate, though? That's I don't know if you could say the same thing about the professors. Could you, Sam?
Sadly, no. It's funny. The student from Seton Hall is actually far more normal and far more common than widely believed. Over the last couple of years, since I was in, people attempted to cancel me in a very similar way to what happened at Princeton. Students have been flocking to me. I get dozens of emails every week, and I hear this from many, many right of center professors as well, where students are saying, we want to hear the other ideas. We want to know what's going on. And it's one thing to have that anecdotal evidence. It's one thing to have my classes oversubscribed. It's really terrific to speak around the country, or pre-COVID speak around the country, and meet students everywhere. But when you have empiric, which is what's written up in Real Clear Policy, what's very clear is students want to hear other ideas. They don't want to live in an echo chamber. They don't like the monoculture that's sort of thrust upon them. And to your question, the problem are the professors and the administrators. These students come in, they're eager to hear ideas. They do appreciate diversity. They do appreciate difference. They want to debate. They want to have that dialogue. But unfortunately, far too often, the administrators get their hands on them. They come in, they're told, here's what to think, here's how to think. If you don't think this, you're evil. There'll be social consequences accordingly. And then for too many professors, as we saw in Princeton, or in my case, Sarah Lawrence, back that up. And that's a huge problem and a failure of the professorate.
Well, what do you think about what's going on at Reuters? The English department's no longer Rutgers University, which is a Big Ten school, which I don't think should be one. The English department is no longer emphasizing teaching proper English grammar or standard academic forms of writing in an effort to, quote, stand with and respond to Black Lives Matter movement.
Well, I should point out this is not just the Rutgers issue. This is an issue you're seeing with departments around the country. And you see a lot of this going on in the hard science departments, where people are saying chemistry and biology. Let's just stick to chemistry. It's a little cleaner. But, that the chemistry departments have implicit racism. This is not what the goal of teaching chemistry is about. You combine atoms, you create things. This is a problem. We're here to teach. We're here to promote discourse as faculty. And many of my faculty colleagues are falling on the job very, very hard right now. The good news is sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish the good news.
The good news is that there are many professors, and not just at Princeton and not just at Sarah Lawrence, but there are thousands of us who are pushing back. It's slow. It's not going to be an easy fight, but many, many of us believe that this has to stop, and that our job is to promote that viewpoint diversity. Well, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and part of it may be, you mentioned the data in your piece at RealClearPolicy.com, and let's talk about that. You mentioned this Higher Education Research Institute survey, which finds that, for example, 67% of the students who responded are open to having their views challenged, and they believe that that was an asset of theirs. That their openness to having their views challenged is something that makes them, a better person, a more intellectually interesting person, a more thoughtful person. And they're right. Maybe part of it is convincing people who think they're in the minority because they don't see that view reflected in the professorate or the administration, that their views are actually the majority, and maybe they'd be a little bit more confident about expressing them and pushing them on the adults on campus, so to speak.
No, I agree with that. I think that there is this, I don't love the term silent majority, but there is this silent majority of reasonableness on college campuses. But there's a fear, and it's this pervasive administrative machine that hovers over everything: classrooms, dormitories, social spaces. We saw this at Yale, very, very pronounced. And the students are afraid to do it. One of the reasons I'm very comfortable putting myself out there is that we can be role models as professors. And as soon as students see faculty step up and say, you have a right to ask these questions, you have a right to disagree, and in fact, you should disagree, students become more and more emboldened. And you can see that at a place like Lawerence. It's a small sample, of course. But as we have more and more faculty doing it, more and more students will react to it. It is an uphill battle. But again, the students are right about this. It's really this administrative class that has its tentacles, for lack of a better word, in every facet of higher education life. And the reason I've been writing so much about it is I would love your listeners in Chicago and nationwide to realize this is an issue. We need to demand more. Let the faculty teach, and let's live up to our values, which is actually viewpoint diversity. Too many faculty are forgetting that.
There's another good data point contained in the survey that you broke down, which is the ideological divide between Gen Z, what percentage are left of center, characterize themselves left of center, what percentage characterize them as right of center, and what percentage doesn't characterize them at all, characterize themselves at all. It's actually much, much narrower than the academicians on campus. And so part of that, at some point, it seems to me, perhaps some good news, silver lining, is you're going to have to serve the marketplace, or you will be served by the marketplace. And if you are going to continue to have, left-wing viewpoints run at a 9-to-1 clip in all these major areas of study, then you're going to lose students to other colleges where there is more representation of diversity along intellectual lines, consistent with what the diversity of viewpoints is among the students.
Exactly. Another thing to mention is that this administrative class and even faculty who are left of center here, this did not happen overnight. This is something that's been a movement that's been growing very quietly. It's very clear if you're in higher ed that it's been developing, but it's occurred over the course of at least a decade, if not 2 decades, gradually building, gradually adding centers, gradually adding more and more subfields to promote a certain set of viewpoints that may not be open or willing to have that sort of dialogue and discourse. So, to push back, it's a hard pushback already, and it's only been a few years. This may take, 5 to 10 years to recenter and to reorient and to really achieve our goals of real diversity and to have people who have conservative ideas and non-extreme progressive ideas feel comfortable. It's going to be a slow fight, but I also think that it's been a very strong pushback already. And if you look at social media and you look at college students around the country, at least the ones I speak to, and they're significant, they don't like it. They are pushing back. But again, it's not something that's going to happen in 6 months to a year. This is going to be a very slow thing. The marketplace, I agree with you, will correct this. But again, it may take, a couple of years. It's not going to happen, within a year or two.
Do you think that the economics of universities will drive change maybe faster than we could imagine? The economics, not just because of COVID and the shutdowns and the argument over whether or not distance learning should include a tuition rebate, but the economics even before that for a lot of mid-sized universities. There was a good Richard Vedder piece in Forbes last week about universities in Ohio that are not Ohio State, but smaller ones, MAC schools like Ohio U, that could be gone in a few years because of the economic realities that they're facing. They don't have $30-40 billion endowments, and they've misspent and misprioritized. And that combined with COVID and combined with a college environment that is perceived to be very hostile to somebody who is not, running around on the streets of some major city right now, means that a lot of colleges aren't going to be here, and maybe that scares some colleges straight.
I think it does, and actually I agree with his piece completely. I think a lot of colleges were in trouble. I think COVID is now going to accelerate this as we have some economic belt-tightening to do. A lot of families, a lot of students are going to say, do we need to be going into debt right now? Do we need to be taking on this burden? Are we comfortable spending this and continuing this, allowing this process to occur? When we're not getting anything out of it, our parents and families are going to send their kids to the schools and say, I'm comfortable spending $60,000 to $70,000 to have them indoctrinated, but not walk away with critical thinking skills, certain life skills, and certain, technical skills that we need in the marketplace today. So I would even argue COVID has sped up what we're going to see. I think we're going to see a significant number of colleges and universities decline and disappear. And one thing to note is even those schools that have those $40 billion endowments, like Harvard, if you read their newspaper all the time, they're in trouble, even with that endowment, because they can't touch most of their endowment. Mm-hmm. They're running deficits still. So the marketplace may even be accelerated thanks to COVID in this. And this may not be a bad thing. There's been too much bloat in higher ed. There's been too much expansion of the administrative state in higher ed. And this may help correct for it. This actually may, again, bring the market forces into this much more quickly.
He is Samuel Abrams, professor of politics at Sarah Lawrence College, visiting scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. Professor Abrams, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
Thinking about life insurance? What if you could make one free phone call and learn your best price from nearly a dozen highly rated, price-competitive companies? Well, that's exactly what happens when you call SelectQuote Life. For example, George is 40. He was getting sky-high quotes from other companies because he takes meds to control his blood pressure. But when I shopped around, I found him a 10-year, $500,000 policy for under $25 a month. I'm SelectQuote agent Dan Savino. And believe me, if SelectQuote isn't shopping for your life insurance, you're probably paying too much.
For a free quote, call 800-523-3771. That's 800-523-3771. 800-523-3771. Or go to SelectQuote.com. Since 1985, we shop, you save.
Get full details on the example policy at SelectQuote.com/commercials. Your price could vary depending on your health, issuing company, and other factors. Not available in all states.
I just took mine. Balance of nature, feeling